received an offer from a former client to work for a women's leadership consulting firm and jumped on it. And I've been working for them for about a year.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you.
Okay, I'm Lori Tompos. I'm the CEO of Avail Consulting. Basically, I'm availing myself to you. I have passion for inspiring and motivating and encouraging women, and I do a lot of workshops to essentially help women master their strengths and address what those are, assess what those are, and figure out how they can be more effective, better leaders, all that. So I do that with the MBTI, and I'll do communication skills with the DISC, and I do emotional intelligence with the EQ assessment. And then and if you're a team and you're trying to figure out where you're stuck or what you're doing or whatever, I'm also a consultant for the Team Clock Institute, which helps teams address where they are, figure out where they are in the process of their teamwork and what their next steps should be. And then you could drill deeper individually, which is what the previous three we're talking about with the MBTI and the DISC and stuff. So a little bit about me is that I'm from the class of '89, got branched into air defense artillery accidentally. They said it was too cushy. I chose AG and they were like, too cushy, you have to go combat arms. So I had to go Patriot missile system, and then just happened to be with timing that I was in the Gulf War. And so I made sure that I knew the Patriot really well, and then did that. Afterwards, went to grad school, then came out and was one of these new things called a change management consultant for Accenture. Then the very first project that I was on was a new thing called SAP. And so then I got certified in that for production planning and stuff, and then did the change management aspect of that. Did that for several years, stepped off the line and was permanent faculty then at our training center, our international training center. And that was awesome. Then had some babies. And so was like, all right, I just want to work part-time. And then we moved to California. So I was like, okay, now got to do something online. So I taught online leadership, managing organizations, and leading change in organizations. So I taught for like almost 16 years. And then I got my MBA when I was here in Elmhurst, and then walked down the hall and was like, I want to teach in the classroom. And so they were like, oh, that's great. So then I've been an adjunct teacher then too. And meanwhile, I've continued my workshops and my passion for women in particular, like I said, helping them to be better leaders and better teammates and that kind of thing. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. So I really appreciate both of you taking the time today to join us on this webinar and provide your insights. Really kind of want to just dive in and talking about what opportunities are out there for women in the workforce and kind of what can hold us back and work on our own development in order to be more effective. So based on both your experiences in the military and outside of the military, I want to start by kind of when women get involved in the workforce. And we know that women traditionally kind of start behind. They are not likely to apply for jobs unless they're 100% qualified for those jobs compared to some of their the tendencies of men applying for the same jobs. They also are known to not negotiate for higher salaries once they've been hired. How do you shift that?
Well, I mean, a big part of this is just educating women on, the process of applying for jobs, whether it's, with the federal government or with the state government or in corporate America, because where you're applying to, what workforce you're going into, it does matter how you apply and what your resume looks like, and teaching women these things. And then as far as the negotiations go, part of that issue is something else that we can talk about later, but that's just one of the basic things is women knowing their worth and presenting themselves forward in a position where they are acknowledging that worth, and sort of getting out of the concept of they're a part of a team, working together. And the most interesting thing about working in corporate America that we found in our research is that one of the skills that corporations always look for is teamwork. But then when it comes time to get promoted or get a raise, women will emphasize the teamwork and their personal greatness. Like, my team closed this many accounts and increased the bottom line for our company this much money, whereas the men seeking promotions and raises will say, we'll use the pronoun I. And so teaching women to take credit for their leadership of a team and not being as inclusive and that seems to go against what corporations are saying they want, but it's something that we have to talk about and get women to acknowledge.
I think you're totally right, because, hey, Lynn.
Hey there, sorry, Jackie. So I was held up with the Performer of the Month award. So
oh, that's awesome.
Was unexpectedly in receipt of it. So my apologies for being late.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Lynn, are you in a vehicle?
I am. It's my portable office.
Awesome. I love it.
Lori, did you have anything you wanted to add to what Iris was talking about?
Sure. Okay, so what I would say is that, to your point, we were talking about negotiations and women not applying for a job unless they're like almost overqualified, and just women not having kind of the, going after things. And Iris was mentioning the whole aspect of men being very good at self-promotion and having no trouble with that or whatever, where women really struggle with that. Women are more about like, oh, the team did it, we did it together and everything else. Whereas men are like, this is what I did, here's how I operate, that kind of thing. And so I think to a certain degree, it's a little bit of the socialization, like we were mentioning. I know that for myself, I come from a long line of educators. So that when I went to grad school, I got out of the Army and went to grad school. And right after that, I knew I didn't have the profile. I didn't have the proper credentials to get the job at Accenture. I knew that I would have to do something different. And I happened to work in the Office of Career Services. And so I went in there and so during a career fair, they had 100 people in line to see them, easy. And everyone looking fabulous and with their resumes and whatnot. And I went up to the guy and I said, hey, lunch is in room 204 and I'm interested in your change management practice. And he said, wow, that's great. We don't even recruit for that. It was so early in the practice that it was awesome that I knew about it. And that's how I got in the door. Now, years later, and then I got accidentally into SAP, which was a brand new thing, and it's huge now. Everybody's heard of SAP. So I was doing change management aspect, but I realized I knew the most about production planning, or the most about SAP, the system in general, again, kind of accidentally, because I got sent to the school for it, because someone dropped out at the last minute. And so then that was like a premium, and that was in high demand and everything else for SAP. Well, I got a bump, as did everyone, if they were working on that particular kind of project. But when I left the firm, I could see my own profile, and they showed me my folder, right, my employee folder, and they showed me where they had expected me to negotiate coming in. They had expected to pay me like $2,000 more, and I never asked for it, so I didn't get it. And so that's a lesson that I want to pass on, ladies. The other thing is that when last year I teach a class on professional foundations of career development, and last year I sat in on a panel for the follow-on course, which is more about moving into what you want to do in your career. And they had a panelist who talked about negotiations, and she had said, people expect it now. They are wondering about you. They think you're not interested in the job if you don't negotiate at this point in time currently.
Really interesting, Lori. And I know that there's been some research on penalties that women pay for negotiating. for salaries that men don't pay. Lynn, if you don't mind, can you give us a brief introduction about you? And then if you have any thoughts on this question.
Certainly. So I retired from the Army 2 years ago after about 29 years of service. So commissioned out of West Point, I went field artillery. It was me and 200 guys in my basic course.
I believe
And I've had a fun time. You know, I stayed in as long as I was having fun. And when I wasn't, then it was time to leave. So I also studied operations research. I found that, you know, in my last year at the academy, become a passion of mine because, you know, all about solving problems and how can we do things better? How can we solve problems? Went back to school to get my doctorate so that I could solve bigger problems. On this topic, and this is interesting. And, you know, we absolutely agree with Lori in terms of women typically are not comfortable with self-promotion at all. We're not brought up to be self-promoters, you know, whereas for men, I think it's modeled early on. And I mean, even my 16-year-old son comes by it naturally, you know, and it's just a difference in how we perceive ourselves. So we have to learn how to promote ourselves. I was well into my 40s before I could look at somebody and say, hey, I'm damn good at what I do. You know, and the first time I said that, I was flabbergasted that I actually said that in front of somebody. And the other thing that was interesting is at about the same time, I had said something to with one of my bosses. And I said something about I did something right, and he took me to task for using the I word, but yet he turned around and did it himself all the time. So, you know, the message was I'm supposed to use we, but it's okay if he takes credit for what I do.
Wow.
And, you know, and you're like, interesting kind of thing, you know. And I had read when I retired about the men apply for jobs when they're 60% qualified,
Right,
women
right.
until they're 120% qualified. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be like a dude. And, you know, if I'm not qualified, I'm not going to apply. I mean, if I'm not fully qualified, I'm going to apply anyways if I think it's interesting.
Right.
And so, you know, I got the job I'm in, and, you know, I went back and I asked for more money. I asked for more vacation time. And it's like, you know, we're not comfortable doing that, but sometimes we have to push ourselves to do those kind of things. You know, I'm fortunate in that my stepdad, when I was a kid, negotiated for everything. So,
Wow.
you know, my family members are going to go buy a car. I go in, I do my research, and I go in and say, yeah, this is what we're going to pay. You can take it or leave it, kind of thing.
Wow. Okay.
And it was funny because one time I had a manager come out and say, that was so much fun. That's how the used car business used to be, kind of thing.
Wow.
And so, you know, you get some positive, rewarding experiences out of it, but most of us are not comfortable with it. And I think part of it comes too from the idea, we all go to a store and we pay whatever they're asking. We don't even think to ask, oh, do you have a military discount? Is this coming on sale next week? We don't, you know, we've been trained not to think that way. And so, you know, it's how much more could I have in my pocket if we don't negotiate for, you know, the salary from the get-go? It carries over too. Men ask for raises, and they ask for bigger raises. You know, when's the last time any of us have asked for a raise? You know, hey, I did something great. Can I have a raise? Yeah.
You mentioned, Lynette, the fact that once you became 40, you started really owning your kind of self-worth and the confidence and the competence. I recently read an article that was sent to me by the general officer I was an aide for, and it talked about between the ages of 40 and 60, women's confidence increases by about 29% in the workplace. Men in that same group, it was, I don't remember the exact number, but it was single digits. So I think to your point, there's something about men earlier in their careers are more confident.
Oh, yeah.
Once we start hitting 40 and above, we really start making up that ground. But there is some reason that there's that divide earlier in our careers.
And I can honestly say, like, in the finance industry, where you have a lot of young men coming in their 20s, and there weren't as many middle-aged women like myself that, you know, when we were in meetings or on conference calls, I would hear these guys talk, these 20-year-old guys who were just starting to get into the business. And, you know, it was all, you got to fake it to make it. And it was just such a foreign sort of concept for me generally. Like, I would never have said those words or used that philosophy in any time of my life. So I can really see, and of course finance is maybe an extreme case because you do have to kind of be brash and like that a little bit. But I do feel like the finance industry is actually, which is, well, first of all, I'm going to say the finance industry has some of the most gender bias issues in it right now. But a lot of companies are really committed to parity and to promoting more women. And the biggest reason is financial, because they see that companies that have at least a third of women on boards or a third of women in the C-suites make significantly more money and have lower risk. And I'm probably going to get this statistic wrong, but it's in one of our books and some of our research that during the financial crisis, if a company had a female CFO, they were 8 times less likely to go bankrupt. And the findings were that when things got bad, many male CFOs would double down on the risk, whereas the women would, you know, retract and become more conservative, which, you know, saved a lot of companies. So companies are acknowledging that what women can bring to the table. So I do see some of that fake it to make it not being as accepted in the finance community and hopefully in the rest of corporate America. But I think that women could learn a little bit from that, because we're so hard on ourselves. And I mean, we're hard. Women are just hard on ourselves, period, whether it's our appearance or, oh, I said that one thing wrong. Like, I should have said this. Yes. And I tell all the women that I work with and my girlfriends and my daughter, you got to just shut that little voice in your head. You need to shut it up, because most people are not looking for the mistakes that you have made. Most people are dealing with their own stuff. So, and confidence is very attractive, and confidence is very encouraging for companies. So don't talk yourself out of opportunities because of that little voice, and don't talk yourself out of success because of the personal things that you put on yourself. And I think women do tend to do that more than men.
Well,
I agree. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, with the whole fake it until you make it, I only heard that for the first time maybe a couple of years ago. But in a lot of ways, it resonated with me, because it's like, so that's what all these dudes have been doing. But the thing is, you know, as women, I mean, we can project more confidence than what we feel. And I think that's a big thing. And the more you project it, the more you practice it, the more you feel it, you know, and with every win that builds your confidence. Because we have no experience projecting confidence when we're not necessarily feeling confidence, I think that plays into Jackie's comment earlier and why it takes us so long before we really build the confidence, because we build the confidence when we've got a track record of success,
right?
Rather than using each little success along the way to build that.
Right. I feel like we don't start out as confident. And right. So where men start out as confident already and like, oh, I got this and and women are like, no, I want to make sure I come correct. That I know what I'm doing, that I've already mastered this content before I come in and own it with my confidence. And I totally support the research that says that you reach a certain age, I'm there, where you're like, I do know that I can help people. I do know that I'm good at it. I know that what I'm doing is effective. I know that I've helped a lot of women feel, find themselves, be inspired, find their personality strengths, and go after what they need. I can tell you though that this has been a long journey because I did not grow up with that. And we were talking about the negotiations. I come from a family who never ever would have done that. Never ever would negotiate anything. So I did not have that in my skill set at all. I did not have any idea of what that was. And when we went to West Point, Lynn and I are classmates actually. When we went to West Point, I'm from a small town in Ohio. I'm the first person in 25 years to go to West Point from my school and my area. And I'm sure that they were just like, who is this woman? What is, why is she interested in a service academy? Because there were very, very, very few women at the time that were. And I was just so driven. And so I think there's something to be said about having enough drive, having enough confidence, having enough competence to have that lovely combination move you forward in the workplace and bring great people along. Because that's the thing is that once I understand my own strengths and my own opportunities for challenges and stuff, I try to surround myself with people who bring that skill set, right?
Yeah.
But even when we were at the academy, people said, the guys looked me in the eye and said, women shouldn't be here. And I said, your issue is with Congress. But we could still communicate and stuff because I made sure that I knew my stuff. I made sure that I was really contributing and stuff. And so then they not had to respect me, but really did respect me. And now we all have such strong friendships and everything else with all the guys in our class that I would never have traded that. But I didn't come in with that confidence. I just came in with some drive.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say is we can have, drive and competence without having the confidence, that's kind of a weird kind of thing.
And I think we need all three, right? You got to have all three. You got to know what you're doing and then you have to do it well and then project that's okay. And then advocate for yourself.
Teach it and model it and coach it in the women who are younger than we are.
Exactly. And that's why that's my mission and purpose is to figure out, is it because I'm a woman or is it because of my personality? What is that's in my leadership style that can help me move forward?
So a lot of what I'm hearing in this conversation is kind of the strengths and the weaknesses that women have in the workplace, and particularly a lack of asserting confidence, whether that is we lack the confidence or we don't know how to portray that in a positive way, as well as kind of the flip side of that is this idea of perfection. Mm-hmm. And I must be incredibly competent before I feel like I'm able to assert my confidence, or else someone might call me out, right? So, and Lynn, to your point about mentoring the women coming behind us, what are those strengths that we really need to capitalize on? Our ability to develop teams was mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. So what are the strengths that we have that we bring to the workplace that we really need to capitalize on? And what are those areas that we really need to focus our development on?
So I would start with, as women, we've been under a microscope. We've been expected to be perfect, and that's made us overly critical of one another way too often. Yes. And instead of looking for mistakes in our performance and in other people's performances, we need to seek out the constructive, positive behaviors, reinforce those, compliment those, call out and reward successes, and help build one another up. Because when you build those relationships and build those strengths, it's harder for anybody to pick them apart and isolate individuals for being poor performers. So if you bring people into an organization and you mentor them in terms of the organizational culture, the behaviors that help make people successful, bring them into the fold, make them part of the team, then it's harder, I think, for people to fail, and it's harder for them to be isolated, and therefore I think it's harder for them to be poor performers as well.
Right.
So just a few thoughts in terms of, you know, how do you bring women into new organizations and help make them successful? I mean, you know, people who went to the military academy as early as Lori and I did, you understand that there's a spotlight effect where, you know, one woman performing bad makes all women makes men perceive that all women are bad performers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so therefore we can avoid that by helping, you know, bring everybody up to our level of performance, you know, by helping people succeed from the get-go, and by building some social relationships, I think, as well, by championing other women, by highlighting their successes for other people. One of the things that I read was about men get a lot of opportunities for promotions because they have a champion out there who promotes them. Okay.
Yes.
You know, as women, we need to find our own champions, but we also need to champion for other women.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about is we've done a lot of research on the different things that companies are looking for in terms of leadership characteristics, and how women are viewed in having some of these characteristics, and how men are viewed with some of the characteristics, which ones are considered to be very important, and then what kind of advice and mentorship that women get on these characteristics. So some of the things that women are being told are actually, it sounds like it's the best advice, but sometimes it isn't. And in our studies, we've seen that in terms of personal greatness, and these are, when I talk about personal greatness, I'm talking about all of the characteristics that employees get advice on in order to get promoted and to succeed in their business. And if you look at the characteristics and personal greatness, women actually have, are generally more successful at a majority of these characteristics than the men are.
Right.
So why is it that women are getting the same advice on personal greatness that the men are, when we're already kind of ahead in that field? I think that a lot of that is gender bias. And so one of the things that we found is that, okay, so one of the personal greatness characteristics is communication. Women actually communicate better with employees, with supervisors in writing than men do. But again, it's women finding that more direct language, even in their writing, not just in selling themselves, but in their writing and in their communications, to make them feel more authoritative. Now, one of the reasons, and I forgot to mention this earlier, is I think that some of our generations, and I don't know if this applies to young women today, but I know I grew up in the South in a small town, and I was taught to be nice, right? Don't ever shake the cart, Rissa. Be a nice girl. And I think that, you know, to some degree did affect me throughout my Army career until I kind of recognized it. And then maybe a little bit later, in that psychologically in the back of my head, shaking the cart, being bold, being authoritative was not being a nice girl. So that's something psychologically that I had to kind of work through, and that I think that some women have to deal with as well. And then the second thing in personal greatness is we're taught to network a certain way. And a lot of the things that we're taught to use, you know, personal networking for looking for employment, for growing our business, et cetera, but women are not taught how to network within their company across different division lines. And one of the things, because what my company focuses on is helping women get from middle management to higher management. And we have a key term called the missing 33%, because literally, if you look at the number of women at middle management and lower management, you'll have, you know, a certain number. And if you look at the projection of promotions for across the board of a company, there should be 33% more women in higher management. And people have always kind of written it off to women having children and opting out of the workforce. But what we find that that's actually not necessarily true. The problem that many women face is that they start their families and then they feel like they're stuck in middle management. Like they're not being given any roadmap or any advice on how to move to higher management. And this is all often right about the time where they do start their families. So it's not necessarily that they just want to scale down on work. It's that they're making all these sacrifices for their family and they're not seeing, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel on what is possible. And then you have gender bias against women who have children and who are pregnant as well, which we can talk about later. But the important thing that women need to know who want to move into higher management is that it's not good enough to know everyone in your division. Say you work in HR, like just if you could be really great at HR and you could know everyone in your division, but you need to know other people in other parts of the company, like finance or operations or advertising. And you need to know how those things work so that when you speak to your supervisor, your boss, you can show how you have influenced positively these other divisions. Too many times women will just say, I'm just going to do my job really, really well in my division, show everyone how great I am in this role. But to expand out into, you know, into higher management, what people are looking for is that networking and knowledge of how the, you know, how the company works across the board. And men are taught this. Men who move into higher management are mentored on this. Generally, women are not.
Right, that's true. I think about at Accenture years ago, the person that they put in charge of pregnancy and maternity leave was a single white male who called me exactly at 6 weeks and was like, when are you coming back? And I was like, hi, thank you for asking. It's a girl and we're doing well and I'm still bleeding, so I'm not going to be back anytime soon. I'm sorry to be that blunt, but it just was like, oh, that's awful. Just doing stuff like that in general. Or when they were like, well, let's try to keep more women in consulting. What can we do? Let's have a meeting at 5:30 on a Wednesday evening to talk about it.
That's great.
Oh, could you pick a worse hour in the whole week? No. Yeah. Just stuff like that we've kind of overcome. But to your point about the networking, also of like the kind of networking that we're talking about, it is like constructive, strategic relationships that develop where I am so much more likely to want to work with you if I like you, if I know you. And that, right, the good old boys network or whatever, that's harder for women to break into. But I certainly would strive to encourage women to do just that. Learn to golf, learn to learn some, if you're interested, learn some sports, learn how to talk about those things, learn how to know things. That's an area of opportunity for people. Find connection points with other people in terms of their interests and go from there, establish a relationship with someone and then ask, hey, what is it that, that you're doing at work? I know I've got this job. I'd like to see how it connects to your job. Is there a way that I can help you or that we can work together or whatever? I'm more willing to talk with you about that if I already like you and we've already established some trust.
what I'm hearing from both of you is this idea of actually being strategic leaders within an organization. And that means I have to
Yes.
I have to broaden my silo and actually
Right.
learn how I can add value to the business as a whole.
Exactly.
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 Iris, you had mentioned that men kind of learn these skills in networking through mentorship relationships that tend to be lacking for women. And I'm sure that depends partially on the industry, but how do we start fixing that as women that are a little bit more senior, or what do we need from our junior leaders? What do they need to do in order to foster these mentorship relationships?
Well, I think that to be quite honest, that kind of change on how women are mentored and how, maybe unconscious bias causes senior men to mentor women differently than men. If you're a woman, you can seek out and you can ask these kind of questions and try and show that you're a strategic thinker. But what we do, one of the things we do when we work with companies on this issue, companies that have acknowledged that they have a problem, is reverse mentorship. And that's when we have women basically mentor junior or middle management women, talk to their supervisors or a senior executive in the company and sort of mentor them on the challenges they face and different issues. So really the change on mentorship needs to come from the higher. I don't know. I mean, we can reach out and we can work really hard, but I think throwing the mentorship thing on the junior women it's a really tough thing to do, because if you have someone who's not open to it and who is just going to continue to mentor men and women differently, and they might not even understand that they're doing it, it's going to be hard to get them to change, and that's why consulting companies are in this business. So I think the biggest thing that women could do, I mean, for most companies, the bottom line is money. And, you can, if you're working for a public company, or if you know someone who works in the finance division, know the balance sheet, know the divisions that are making the most money, know what products are making the most money, know how you fit into that. If you can talk about the balance sheet, and what the company owns and what doesn't, then that's really valuable. So many times in really large companies, you'll have people who have no idea what the company owns and what they don't. And one of my best stories is when Eastern Airlines went bankrupt, and a large part of that was due to the strikes that happened before that, and they were unable to negotiate with labor. And part of the problem was that labor didn't know that all of the airplanes were leased. They thought that Eastern Airline owned the airplanes. And so they were negotiating for much higher than what the company could pay and stay in business. So I always say it's really good for anyone in management in the company to understand what the bottom line is for the company and where the money is.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like that's where you can demonstrate your understanding of strategy, your understanding of what's going on in the business. And that is a valuable skill set. That's the thing. You're trying to figure out what brings value to your company. What is literally, at one point, my husband worked for McDonald's for many years, and at one point they brought in a new CEO, and he basically streamlined all projects. They had all these projects going and different kinds of activities. And he came in and was like, hey, if this does not contribute to the bottom line and you cannot make a case for it, thus and so, then we will not be continuing this anymore. And it's kind of just kind of a straightforward way to look at it, because I do see that sometimes that's not the strength of a person, in that that's not their purview. They're thinking, I'm going to do the best job that I can at this job that I have, and I will get rewarded because I'm doing my best job. You know, it's like how we view competition, right? So women keep their head down and they're like, okay, I'm going to get recognized because I'm doing the best job. I'm the number one whatever in this group. I should get recognized for that, not realizing that there's more to it than the competency. Included in that is you having an understanding of where the value sits and where the levers are that you can be making sure that you know about. That's part of knowing what you're doing, knowing your stuff. And that's the education that you have to figure out where the value sits in your company and where you contribute to that and where the different pieces are. So like the story that I have for that is that I think I was telling you guys I went to the SAP school at the last minute here. I'm there with everybody literally putting in business process consulting SAP. My aspect is change management. They're thinking about me for end user training. We're several years away on this project from what we're going to do. 3 years later, SAP brings in Anderson to actually put together their training. So at the time that I went through, it's so early. It's all we had the big six at the time. All the consultants are sitting together just trying to get the system to work, just get a prototype to work. And very few women are there. And but I'm very happy that I'm there, but I'm new to consulting. I'm new to SAP. I'm new to manufacturing. I'm new to production planning. And I'm totally needing to get totally immersed in that and figure out what I'm doing first, and then and I had to ask for help. It's very humbling, but it's okay to ask for help. That's one of the things that I learned. But afterwards, I came back to my project. I realized I know more about SAP than anybody else putting in the project. We're working with a large company, and they make the yellow and white lines on the roads. They make weird stuff that people have not heard of or whatever, right? But they're a large manufacturing company. I go to this project. I realize my role is, as I said, end user training. Their role is to actually put this thing in, right? Figure out how to customize it and put in SAP for this company. And we've got the technology and the business process consulting and everything else. And I have more knowledge about SAP than that. I have 6 binders, 6 3-inch binders of German screen prints. OMG. So I have an idea of how we could semi-customize things. Like, let's create a purchase order as far as we can in SAP, and then let's pump it out to make it specific to HP or wherever we are, right? And I called the first woman partner in the firm, and who was the head of change management at the time then, and said, here's my idea, and for how we could do team project training. And she was like, I don't get it. And I was like, oh, darn it, I know it's a great idea. I didn't say that, but I said thank you. And so then I called my friend who had gone to SAP school with me in the business process consulting side, and called him and said, hey, what do you think of this idea? And he was like, how fast can you get to Chicago? And I was like, I need a couple of hours to get on a plane, pack a bag and get on a plane. So I did that, and then it became a huge project, because it was like, I could see a way that it could benefit the whole firm, and it could benefit all people on all SAP projects. And then I became the point person for that. And so that really kind of launched me.
It's this idea that I find interesting of kind of the strategic viewpoint of growing, emerging leaders, and whether or not they can begin to see more broadly than the role that they specifically play, coupled with, Iris, as you were talking about, the missing 33%.
Yes.
Women are underrepresented in leadership roles. It takes industry, government, military, everywhere. Women are underrepresented in senior leadership. What impact does that have on our institutions? And are women prepared for these roles, or what's preventing women from stepping into those roles?
I think in a lot of cases, it comes back again to, what's preventing is sometimes, not having a champion. People, sometimes, who come first to mind? Oh, there's an opportunity. Well, what about John? He always steps up and does stuff. And people don't go, hey, what about Lynn? She's an outstanding performer. So, who's the champion who's bringing the performance and the capabilities of the women up for consideration. So, but then, the second piece of things is sometimes we got to let our bosses know that we want something more as well. And so
Right.
sometimes we got to say, I'd really like to be considered for this type of job if there's something coming open soon. And
Right.
we don't do that. We expect it to come to us because we've been excellent performers. We don't
Right.
turn around and ask for what we want or ask for where we want to go.
Right.
And then I think the second thing is, in addition to not being thought of for an opportunity, is we need to be brought up for those opportunities as well. You need to be, men are typically groomed for future opportunity. We need to, create the same kind of system for women where they're brought up for these kind of jobs, where they're moved around so that they get that broad basis of experience so that they can move up into those jobs and be capable and competent in them. And
my
I think
hypothesis, Lynn, based on what you're saying, is that this is a very tangled web of
Right.
cause and effect.
Yes.
I find it interesting, and I'm wondering if you intend it as kind of two sides to the same coin of we don't have champion and we don't make it known what it is that we want, and perhaps that's lack of confidence.
Yes.
Or whatever. But if we were able to assert, in the future, I would like a vice president role, or in the future, I would really like to be in somewhere in the Pentagon or doing some sort of work. If we were to
Right.
say that,
Right.
would we then have the opportunities to move around to prepare us for those roles and have those champions?
So when's the last time somebody asked you what your aspirations were? Okay. No, I don't think anybody's ever asked me, what are your career aspirations? How can I help you get there?
Mm-hmm.
But that's how I start a conversation with a subordinate. If I know where you want to go, I can help get you there. But nobody's ever asked me that question. And I never went to a boss and said, here's where I'd like to go. Can you help me?
That's right.
And it's something that I've only, I realized that I needed to do it for my subordinates, but I've never really ever had the opportunity to have that conversation with a superior. But we need to, I think, help, create that for younger women.
Right, because I think these are crucial conversations that have to occur, because I feel like men do a lot better job of that, just generally, of asking what they want. What's the ask? And women are super reluctant to do that in general, of like, oh, I'm so reluctant to ask, and but we can't expect the mind reading to occur, and we can't. And we've discovered that if we just keep our heads down and do a fabulous job and expect to get recognized for that, that's not going to happen either.
Right. So one of the things that we've identified in terms of women, mapping out their strategy to get into a C-suite job, is that women are much less comfortable with vocalizing their aspirations, their dreams and goals within business or real estate or anything, really, anything. And I don't know why that psychologically exists.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect that part of it is that goes back to kind of us being team players, for centuries. Women have had to get along to survive. And if our aspirations are too high, we would be called haughty or, other names, whereas men would be called ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thing for men. So I find personally that even if I'm not even talking about business, if I'm talking about something else, say I want to renovate my, you know, my kitchen. If I tell my husband and all my friends, I'm going to renovate my kitchen in 2 years, then I am much more committed to doing it. There's
Mhm.
something about verbally saying something, and then if you write it down, you're even more committed. So teaching women to, first of all, help identify, you know, what their goals and dreams are, telling them that it's okay to talk about it, which seems okay, kind of crazy to have to say it that way, but yeah, some women aren't comfortable talking about it. And then being able to write it down and map out a plan.
Mhm.
And then the second point that you've brought up already is, you know, being able to speak that to higher management and to your mentor is another thing. But I think that that's one thing that women in general need to get over. I will also say that I think just if you look at the timeline of, you know, what women have accomplished, you know, over the last 40 years, it's pretty amazing. We have gone from being not involved in almost any industry, you know, institution, to being involved in everything.
Mhm.
And we're at a real tipping point in
Mhm.
terms of history. And I think this century will be like the century of the woman or the women's revolution,
Yes.
and by historians, just because we are really at a tipping point where the older generation that's in corporate leadership right now, and I'm really speaking of gentlemen who are 55 or older, um, who are really still not used, like they grew up in all male environments.
Mhm.
Whereas, you know, the generation my daughter's growing up in, it's not at all crazy to see women doing everything. So it's a slow
Yeah.
process, but I do see that we're moving in the right direction. And one thing that is really going to tip the balance is when women control a majority of money in this country, which is probably going to happen around 2035, 2030.
Really?
Yes, and so so in finance, they're making a big push to hire a lot of women advisors, and that's how I got my job, I'm sure. But the reason is that women in finance, women who work with financial advisors don't like to be talked down to, and
No.
some male advisors will do that. They'll
That's
assume
true.
that women don't know anything, and that they will talk to them the way they would not talk to a male client. And so many women seek out women advisors, and the finance companies are acknowledging this, and they know that between inheritance, you know, baby boomers passing away and their wives or their daughters inheriting the money, between that and the fact that women are starting businesses, especially minority women, are starting businesses at a much higher rate than men. And then women also save money at a younger age.
Yeah.
Women usually start saving money as soon as they enter the workforce, whereas young men don't really start until they start a family. So yes, I do think that things will start changing when you have, you know, more majority of shareholders are women. A majority of money in banks is belonging to women, and
Yes.
companies are going to see these you know, women customers and clients, and they're gonna make changes, you know, not just to whatever service they're providing or product, but also within their own companies.
Mhm.
Awesome, Iris. That's a here. I hadn't heard that before, so that's a pretty cool statistic. We'll see how that plays out. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We are at 1 o'clock, so I just wanted to give each of you an opportunity. Any closing thoughts that you have? Lori, we'll start with you, and then Iris and Lynn.
I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. It's been really, really interesting to hear from all of you. And I've really appreciated the dialogue and kind of the level of complex thinking that we're talking about today, with really trying to get at what can we do? to help women be more effective in the workplace. I think we're on to it. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say that I love promoting women. I love to see women succeeding, and I'm so proud to be a member of, West Point Women. We are an exceptional group, and I hope that every woman out there knows how special she is and what she's capable of.
So I guess it's my turn. So I thank you for asking me to be here. I'm very humbled to join the team here. I'm always excited to contribute whenever I've got the opportunity to make a difference. And, I think that we're put here to make a difference. And I've learned a lot about women in the workplace, really reflecting on it over the past 10 years or so, things that I never thought about early on. And like Iris, I see things very much changing for the younger generation of women. And I'm happy to help make that happen whenever and however I can.
Really appreciate each of your time, both today and giving the hour here, but also in the prep that you all did in order to get us here today. So thank you sincerely from the board of West Point Women. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm getting the feeling that you all would be open to any of our graduates or cadets reaching out if they have any further questions to follow up.
Absolutely.
Sure, absolutely.
Of course.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day and happy Thanksgiving.